Welcome to Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we're here with Firefighter, Peters Township Firefighter, Jordan Cramer. Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come back.
Absolutely, Dr.
You were on a prior show, and the response was so tremendous about the information that you gave about the Peters Township Fire Department and fire safety and what you do to keep our community safe. And I couldn't wait to get you back to go into a little more depth on how we can prevent fires in our homes, and especially around this Christmas time, this holiday season, when our lifestyles change a little bit and our habits change a little bit. So first of all, I wanted you just to, if you would, review the Peters Township Fire Department, the scope of it, meaning how many fire trucks do we have, how many firefighters, are they volunteer firefighters,
Sure.
paid volunteer firefighters, just to give a little background again.
Right. So we're what's called a combination fire system. We're comprised of both volunteer and career firefighters. The township currently has approximately 15 career firefighters, and that's a combination of full-time and part-time staff. There are 2 paid fire chiefs that oversee the department, and then 1 volunteer fire chief as well. And then in addition to the career firefighters, we have approximately 30 to 35 volunteers as well that are pretty active. So for a community of our size, with the call volume we have, which is this year inching up towards about 1,500 calls, 50 firefighters is a phenomenal number to be able to respond to those emergencies. We operate out of 2 fire stations, the one being across from Peters Township High School on East McMurray Road, and our substation is at the intersection of Sugar Camp and Bebout Roads.
So you have fire vehicles, response vehicles at both of those locations?
Correct. Now the East McMurray station, which is Station 1 and our headquarters, is staffed 24/7. The substation off of Bebout is a home response station. So our volunteers and our off-duty career firefighters respond there if we have large incidents that require multiple apparatus to respond.
And then you also, for the township, run the EMS program?
So we don't run the EMS program. The BFW has 3 ambulances, and they are our transport EMS. So whenever there's a call that requires somebody to be transported to the hospital, normally that's who's going to take it. The fire department, however, is ALS certified and equipped, meaning that we have paramedics and EMTs that work for the fire department, and we have apparatus that are licensed to go to medical calls.
So those medical calls include car accidents and things like
Sure.
that, because I've seen fire trucks and fire response vehicles at those accident sites.
Yeah, so we respond between EMS and rescue to about 400 calls a year. So approximately 30% of our calls fall into those categories. So the EMS and the rescue is a big portion of what we do. A lot of times when you see an ambulance on an emergency, you're going to see a fire truck too.
And what's the reason for that?
Any high priority call where a patient is not breathing, unconscious, if they're in a seizure, anything that's going to require significant resources, you're going to get a fire engine too, because that gives you an additional paramedic and at least an additional EMT as well to help the paramedics. And if the call's severe enough, our personnel will actually transport in the ambulance with Peters EMS as well.
So as a firefighter, you're trained in CPR and respiratory
Sure.
crisis situations?
Yeah, absolutely. We receive the same training that anybody who works on an ambulance does. We have to be hired by the township, and actually a vast number of our volunteers also have EMS training as either a paramedic or an EMT.
So let's hit on that, since you mentioned volunteer. What does it take to become a volunteer firefighter?
Sure.
What type of training?
Yeah, so there's a significant amount of training that goes along with getting the certifications required to become a volunteer. We bring anybody who lives within the township or one of the adjoining communities has the opportunity to come in and join the fire department. And then they go into what's called Essentials of Firefighting. So that gives the basis and basic level of training necessary to move up through the fire service, and that's about 180 hours.
And does that occur at the #1 fire station?
No, so that actually occurs at the Washington County Fire Academy. They can take classes there, or there are a few other options throughout the year as well. Additionally, we also have a junior program, which we're recruiting members for currently. So that's anybody who might be 14 through 17, because you're not allowed to really join officially until you're 18. But we take junior cadets and junior firefighters that are allowed to start learning the system and how we operate. and they're able to actually help us out a little bit so that by the time they turn 18, they're ready to jump into the role of a volunteer firefighter.
So that's a pre-firefighter education, basically.
It is, and that's actually how I started in this industry, and it's how many of our other firefighters started as well. The deputy chief and I last week had the opportunity to go to McMurray Elementary's career day, and we talked to a lot of them about the fact that if this is potentially a career that you want, a phenomenal way to kind of get a taste of what it's like is becoming a junior firefighter.
Yeah, that's in fact what I did before I went to dental school. I went into my brother's office and started to do some assisting to see if I really would like it, because it was kind of a forgoing thing that I was going to walk into dentistry, as coming from a family of dentists.
Right.
But you had to make sure you kind of liked it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a great way of knowing how to do that.
Sure.
So is there a cost to the volunteer firefighters to training, for the training part of it?
No, so everything's provided by our volunteer fire department. Everything is reimbursed. So if they're going away to trainings, they may pay for it initially, but they're immediately reimbursed by the fire department for any costs that incur to them. Additionally, they receive added insurance benefits. They receive a yearly stipend, essentially, to basically take care of the amount of time that they've spent with the department. So it's not a paycheck or anything of that sort, but it is a way for Peters Township to thank them for the amount of time that they spend with the fire department. I mean, if you look at our hours and the amount of people and time it takes to make our organization run, if we did not have our volunteer firefighters, we'd be spending multiple millions more dollars in our fire department. So the value that they bring to the table and the type of asset that they are to our organization is incredible.
Yeah, so it's kind of a win-win. They gain and the township gains.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's a big give and take. It would be very difficult to have a department of our size run on all volunteers, but it would be very difficult to pay for and staff a department without the volunteers in a community of our size.
Do you have age limits on the volunteer that wants to come
An upper age limit? So we don't currently. That's something that a lot of departments are exploring, because one of the leading causes of death as a firefighter, especially in the line of duty, is cardiac related. And what they're finding is that there are people that are doing this too long, or they're not in shape, and it's resulting to them passing away in the line of duty. So that's obviously never something that we want to have to deal with here. We want to ensure that our firefighters are in tip-top shape and ready to respond to emergencies. So currently we don't have a listed upper age limit, but you know, if we get to a point where we feel that something might be unsafe, then the fire chiefs absolutely step in and start to talk to that individual.
So is there a physical required for the volunteer to come in?
There is, and that's one of the other things. We have to do that annually. So that we're one of few departments in Pennsylvania that require that. Each year we have to take a physical agility test and also an SCBA competency. So the pack that we wear on our back with air in it, we have to demonstrate the skills necessary to operate that on an annual basis. But as somebody gets older, as their health might decline, they still have to be able to pass this agility test. And if they can't, unfortunately, they can't be a part.
Well, that's going to be a cumbersome, heavy pack, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah, it is.
And then you're wearing a suit that's heavy as well.
Yeah, so just not carrying any tools, just to put our gear on and our air pack, you're looking at an additional 70 to 90 pounds on your body. So when you add tools that we're carrying, cameras, you've got another 50 pounds there.
So if you're not physically fit, it's probably not the best idea to go become a firefighter.
Correct, yes. Yeah. But we are exploring some other options for people that may not want to be involved in the emergency response side, but may still just want to help their community as a citizens volunteer. So we're currently exploring some options to try to get people more involved in that capacity.
So how does Peters Township fund its fire department?
So we have a couple different routes of funding. Primarily it is through tax money. So the township pays for our large fire apparatus, our ladder truck, engines, rescue, and they pay for obviously the salaries and benefits of the career firefighters, much of the maintenance and prevention. However, the volunteer department also does a fund drive every year, and they're required to put a pretty big portion of that back into our operations. So they raise approximately anywhere from $130,000 to $155,000 a year, and that money is essential for our department to be able to provide some of the extra services that we do. Additionally, that covers some of the incentives that they give to our volunteers, their Christmas party, the things that keep these people wanting to volunteer their time. I mean, as most people go and volunteer for something. It's very rare that you're going to volunteer for something where you know you could lose your life. So these men and women that volunteer with our fire department, they're taking on a substantial risk for very, very little benefit or gain from it.
Yeah, yeah. So when you look at this volunteering, you're trying to institute people that want to come in and maybe volunteer for cleaning the equipment, things like that as well, not necessarily going out and having to fight a fire.
Yeah. So when you look at the organization holistically, absolutely we're responding to emergencies at least 3 to sometimes 10 or 11 a day. But there is so much that goes on in the back end, from the administrative portion, everything from marketing, media to website design. We have a lot of legal things that have to be taken care of. And then taking care of our equipment. We have millions of dollars worth of assets that we have to maintain, that we have to track, that we have to inventory. And there are ways, absolutely, that somebody that maybe does not want to fight a fire can still help us and help their community.
So we'll put some numbers up on the screen from time to time, and that's how anybody that's interested in becoming a volunteer can give you a call.
Absolutely,
they can. The program. Do you have certain times of the year where you actually have a volunteer drive?
No. So there are certain times of year where we'll push it a little bit more, but what we find is it has to be a constant process. Everywhere we go, everything that we do, that has to be something that we're thinking about. So if we're at Giant Eagle collecting money for the Muscular Dystrophy Association.
You were there, saw you there 3 weeks ago,
yeah,
I think it was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then we still have to be talking to people about that as well. Because it is a constant need. We're so fortunate in this community where we haven't faced some drastic shortage of volunteers.
Because our community is kind of interesting because it's transient and people come and go. So you may have a firefighter that lives in the community and then gets transferred somewhere else,
Sure.
and you lose that firefighter. So you always have this need to constantly replace somebody.
Right. And when you look at the demographics a lot of times, and if you look at the demographics, for instance, to our fire department as opposed to some other areas where they may have more of a blue-collar workforce, or they may have a lot of college students living there, they have a much easier time attracting and maintaining volunteers. If somebody from the outside were to look at the demographics of our department, they would be shocked to know how vibrant and how active our volunteer department and our volunteer firefighters are.
And then you have a community fire, citizens fire academy. Would you tell our audience about that and how they can become involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in October, we started our Citizens Fire Academy again. We had originally done it back in 2012 as a means to increase community awareness of what we actually do, because as we've talked before, a small percentage of our incidents or our operations are actually responding to structure fires. There is so much more that we offer to the community and service that I would say a vast majority of community members aren't necessarily aware of. So one of the goals is to increase that awareness, because we know if we teach 16 residents from Peters Township about it, that's going to trickle down to 32, 40, 50, 100. Yeah, because everyone is talking about it. And that ended up happening with this class. We were really happy with it. But the other part of that is also teaching them how to handle an emergency in the initial minutes before a police officer, an ambulance, or a fire truck arrives. So we don't want them to panic. We want them to be able to do CPR. We want them to be able to understand what's happening when they dial 911. So a part of this was touring our 911 center so that they could understand what happens as soon as they press send on their phone, to speaking to a call taker, it being sent to a dispatcher, and then finally them notifying whichever agency is to respond. So it was a really good program. We really enjoyed it.
So you do that once a year? Or?
Currently, yeah, we're looking at some other options to put that program out as well, but I would look for that again in the summer of 2020.
You know, it's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a dirty fire vehicle. So if you wanted to volunteer just to come and wash the vehicles, you could do that.
Absolutely. It's hard to turn down free help, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we take great pride in our vehicles, and we have to keep them for 20 plus years. So a fire truck is a lot more expensive than a car. Our new ladder truck that we purchased last year was upwards of $1 million. So we can't get a new one in 5 years. It has to be maintained and kept in a condition.
Waxed and cleaned. And
yeah, absolutely.
So
especially
a volunteer,
with the salt on the roads here.
Yeah, a volunteer could easily come in and do that.
Absolutely.
Through the show, Jordan, today, I want to talk specifically about certain things, but in general, if I sense something that's going on that I suspect there's a fire, I smell smoke or something like that, what's the first thing I should do?
Call 911.
I call 911 from most people now cell phone. Most people probably don't even have a home phone. So when I dial 911, do I have to give my location and address immediately?
Absolutely. They're going to ask you for it just in case something didn't work right on their end. For the most part, they're able to pinpoint your location.
So if I dial 911 from my house here in Peters, where does that call go?
So it's actually going to follow a couple different paths. So it goes to a different state, and then eventually it goes back to our 911 center. However, that happens in under a second. So you'll be connected to our 911 center. They have standards that they have to meet as far as how quickly they answer a phone call, but normally it's very quickly. And then they'll start the dispatching after that, depending on what type of information you're giving them.
So if I smell something odd, and I say, I think there could be a fire. So they're going to ask for address, name, and then immediately.
They're hopefully going to tell you to get out of the house first.
Is that the first thing I should do, leave the house?
Yes, and then give us a call. What we face, and the reason that I said call 911 first, is we answer the phone very frequently at our station with people calling saying that they have smoke in their house. And that is absolutely not what we want, because we're so involved in the community and we run so many programs that we're sitting in our station very infrequently. We're out and about. So if you call our station, 50% of the time somebody may not answer because we're out on other incidents or we're doing something else. The only way for the 911 center to get in touch with us quickly is via radio. So it's surprising the amount of times that we'll pick up the phone at the station and somebody tells us that their house is on fire.
Because there is a direct line to the station.
There is, yeah, but that should be for non-emergency use only. Even if people have a CO detector going off in their homes, they get worried about calling 911. But we would much rather you call 911 quickly to let them know what's happening and to get us started there. And then if we get there, nothing's going on, that's fine.
So if I smell gas, if my smoke detector goes off and I see nothing happening and I know it's not that weak battery signal or whatever, I leave the house, dial 911, and just stand outside my house and wait.
Get away from the house. Especially this time of year, if your car's not in the garage, it's outside, you can sit in your car so it's warm. We tell people to go to neighbors' houses, but it's important to just take the steps then to get out of the house safely and to be able to call 911.
If I have an alarm system in my home and it's connected to the smoke detector as well, and that goes off, and I don't respond quick enough, and regardless whether it's an actual smoke sensing thing, a fire sensing thing, or just a fault in the system, the fire company shows up?
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you call them and tell them you want the fire department to cancel, we're still going to show up on scene to ensure that what you're telling the dispatch center is what actually happened. There unfortunately are a lot of cases nationally, and it's actually happened here in Peters a long time ago, where there could be some sort of domestic violence that occurred. There could be intentional arson that's occurring, and the smoke detector picks it up. So these people call and try to cancel the fire department because obviously they don't want us showing up and seeing what's going on. So that's one of the reasons that we go to verify. The other reason is that sometimes it does start, or it activates due to a fire in someone's home, and they just want to try to handle it themselves. And we don't want somebody doing that because a lot of times they can be overcome by smoke and then they become unconscious and die, or they can get injured or injure somebody else in their house.
I don't know if it's still true, but and you can answer that for me, but years ago I read where most people die in fires not from the fire but from smoke inhalation.
Sure. Right.
And is that still pretty much the way it works?
Absolutely. That's going to affect you first. It disorients you similar to what CO would do. But it disorients you. You eventually lose consciousness and then pass away eventually.
The fires start from a number of different ways.
Right.
What's the number one cause of a fire in a home, for example?
So pretty standard every single year is cooking. It varies slightly, maybe by a percentage point, but over 50% of fires in a home are caused by cooking in the kitchen.
So is that the standard, like grease fire that
it could be? It could be a malfunction from a coffee machine. There's a range of issues that occurs.
So if I'm, and I'm actually not a bad cook, but I'm somebody that has to really be paying attention to what I'm doing when I'm cooking.
Yeah, right.
I can multitask for everything else, but not what I'm cooking.
Sure.
So if I do something wrong and I overheat some grease on the stove, how do I put that grease fire out?
So one of the easiest things, as long as it's still contained in the container where it started, is to just put a lid on.
So just take a lid, cover it up,
Yep.
cut
It's
the
going to
oxygen
remove the
supply.
oxygen. Exactly. So a fire needs fuel, oxygen, and heat to be able to burn. And if we remove any one of those sources, then it's going to stop the fire.
So the worst thing I could do is throw water on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, right. And again, if it's contained to it's what we consider its container of origin, that's one of the best methods. You could use a fire extinguisher. But as a fire grows, at some point you have to realize it's time to get out and to let us come and put the fire out. We've had fatal fires in Peters Township, and many times it's because the person is trying to put their own fire out or does not want to wait for fire apparatus to get there. So that is something that we don't want to see happen, obviously.
Every home should have a fire extinguisher?
Yeah, at least one. We'd like to see them in multiple places, from the bedroom to the kitchen to the garage.
So cars can start fires in the garage?
Absolutely, and anything, chargers, anything that's in that garage. You've got, a lot of people have gas tanks in them. There are many accelerants that are in a garage and a lot of sources for ignition. So when you combine those two together, we've got a bad situation.
Okay, so number one is caused by cooking. So that's sometimes putting something on the stove and sitting down and maybe falling asleep and forgetting you're cooking
Very frequently,
something.
right. And a lot of times the only way we know about those fires is because of that automatic detection. Somebody may have left their home, they went to pick their child up from practice, and we get dispatched to their house because it's filled with smoke. They left something on the stove. Sometimes they're outside doing yard work and they're upset that the fire truck's there, and then they realize that they had started broccoli on the stove an hour earlier and it's now on fire in their kitchen.
Yeah, it's so easy to be distracted
It
these
is,
days.
absolutely.
And so we really have to pay attention to that. What about people smoking and falling asleep?
That absolutely happens as well. Again, not something that we deal a whole ton with, but that's one of the big risk factors. In addition to that, there are people that smoke while they're on in-home oxygen.
I've actually seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that obviously causes a big issue for us.
And even like misplacing ashes or leaving a cigarette smoldering in an ashtray.
Yep.
Can cause, and a sofa could cause a fire hours later.
Correct. As well as people with fireplaces where they're burning actual logs. They may discard it somewhere in their homes and it ends up catching fire 3 or 4 hours after the fire was out.
So how many structural fires do we have in, say, a given year?
So it's hard to say. We're dispatched for anywhere from approximately like 20 to 60 actual structure fires in a year. So that means that somebody's called 911 and they're saying that either something is on fire in their home or their entire home is on fire. Now a smaller percentage of those end up being actual fires, but it does vary greatly. For example, in the past month, we've probably responded to 5 to 6 fires within the township, in addition to fires elsewhere in our surrounding communities that we assist.
So does that have something to do with the time of the year?
No, most of these fires, one of them at least was a chimney. Actually, I believe we had 2 chimney fires, so those would be more so related to the time of year. But most of the other ones weren't necessarily related to the time of year.
Yeah. So number one, cooking. What's
Sure.
number two?
Would be heating. So that could range anywhere from somebody having a heater too close to a couch, a tree, to them trying to heat their home with other sources, such as a space heater that should have been used outside, or there's still an issue with people trying to use their stoves to heat their homes. So that's the second leading cause of fires inside of a structure.
So not necessarily just a furnace fire,
Right.
caused by a furnace, it's caused by auxiliary heating.
It's normally
Space heaters.
Correct. It's normally caused by incorrect heating methods.
What about candles? Or they play a
Absolutely,
part?
especially during the holidays, actually. So there's a huge push on holiday fire safety this time of year. What a lot of people don't realize is that the vast majority of those fires are started from a candle.
Jordan, we're going to go to a commercial, a little break here.
Sure.
When we come back, I want to focus on fire prevention right at the holidays. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I think everybody's schedule changes so much that they forget about things during the holidays.
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
little
It's
things.
easy to do.
Yeah. We'll be back in a minute at here at Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners with firefighter Jordan Cramer. Welcome back to Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and Tucker and I are here with firefighter from Peters Township, Jordan Cramer. And Jordan, you and I were talking about the holiday season right before a little break there.
Right.
And is there an increase in fires around the Thanksgiving, Christmas season?
There can be slightly. Obviously, our cooking fires increase a little bit. And then we have a lot of issues with decorations. So tree fires actually aren't that common. However, when they do occur, they end up being much more severe when somebody has a live tree inside of their house.
That's because they're so dry and they ignite quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. They can be pretty dry. Once they have a heat source, whether that be from an external heater or a short in Christmas lights, a candle perhaps, once one of those things lights, it's on fire, it moves very, very quickly.
So one of the things you shouldn't do is put that tree near a fireplace or near some type of artificial heat source.
Right, so we don't want it near a fireplace. We don't want any type of external heater near it. We want those Christmas lights that go on it to be UL approved, Underwriters Laboratory. So there is a logo that'll be on any set of lights that you buy. So we want people to make sure that they are approved and they've been tested, as well as inspect your lights every year. So people have animals that might affect them at some point.
That's something, a good point that you're bringing up, because animals tend to chew on wires sometimes.
They can, yeah. So, or even when you're putting them back in their boxes at the end of the season, they could get pinched in the box. So if there's a cut in one of those wires and we have power sparking or arcing from one side to the other, that very easily can quickly start a fire. And again, the fuel that we have there of that dead tree essentially is going to be able to start a fire extremely quickly.
Is there been a reduction that you've maybe noticed when we move from incandescent Christmas bulbs to these new LED bulbs?
I mean, it helps slightly. So obviously, as we look at any type of LED lighting, the amount of power required to run that lighting is far less than it was before, and therefore they're burning at a much lower temperature. So rather than where you could actually burn your hand by touching an old set of Christmas lights, now they're for the most part cool. So the chances of them starting from the lights themselves are lower. Where we see that more so happening is going to be when there's some type of issue with the wires themselves.
Candles are very popular, and I've been in a lot of homes and there have been candles burning and giving off scents and so forth.
Right.
Candles are fairly dangerous.
They can be, especially at this time of year. So we look at a lot of statistics. One of them from the NFPA and United States Fire Administration states that over half of decoration fires, Christmas fires, are started from candles. So that's from them being too close to something else, from an animal or a child knocking it over, and then it starts a fire. So at a minimum, there should be at least a foot between a candle and anything else that may be around it.
And some kind of protection from the candle from when it burns down, that it doesn't
Correct.
set something else on fire.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you almost don't need candles, old-fashioned candles anymore with the way the technology is.
Yeah, there are a lot of other options right now.
Yeah. So the tree, the being too close to a fire source, the candles, what are some of the other issues that happen right around the holidays with fires?
Between the holidays and this time of year in general, we have the heating issue. So we want to remind people to keep everything 3 feet away from an external heater. And that includes the Christmas tree, because that's going to be something that lights quickly. So from your fireplace, from a space heater, we need at least 3 feet of clearance.
So I know in my house I have something called a zero clearance fireplace.
Okay, sure.
And it's not even invented. It's a gas fireplace with fake logs.
Right.
And fake embers. But can that be a source for a fire?
Yeah, absolutely. It's still going to generate heat. There's still heat within that unit. as well as electrical components in that type of fireplace. So there are things that we still want to focus on. We still can't leave the house or go to another area of the house while that's on.
And that's a big deal,
Right.
not leaving the house with something combusting.
Right. I mean, if you look at any of these fires inside the home, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be negligence. From somebody leaving something plugged in, to them leaving a pot on the stove, a space heater on, or in this case, that.
So I should never therefore leave my house with my dryer running.
That's correct. Yeah, that's another great point. So there are issues as far as the exhaust of the dryer being clogged. That happens over a period of time. A lot of people aren't aware of that, or they don't clean out their exhausts. And eventually there's a great chance for that to start a fire and then for it to backfeed into the home.
Because you basically have lint that's a wick,
Right.
and then you have the heat.
A lot of heat, absolutely. And the other thing that we've actually responded to fires inside of this township, and some of our neighboring departments have as well, is just once you take things out of the dryer, they're so hot at times that they can light other things on fire if they sit there and that heat builds. So that's something else that we try to remind people of. You can't take that load of out of the dryer, let it sit together and continue to build heat, especially near something else that might be flammable or combustible.
Yeah, something I would have never even thought of that.
Yeah,
But
it's rare, but it certainly has happened.
A lot of materials are synthetic,
Right.
and so they're going to respond to the heat
Sure.
differently than like cotton or wool would.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Good point. So we have those sources of fire. What are some of the other sources?
So after we get away from that, the heating, the kitchen fires, you go into other appliance fires, TVs, anything that you're plugging in, chargers.
Okay, so my TV's plugged in 24 hours a day. My Wi-Fi is plugged in 24 hours a day. I don't have a toaster, but my coffee pot is plugged in 24 hours a day.
Right.
Should I be unplugging those things when I'm not around?
Yeah, that is the suggested route, and obviously a lot of people don't. One of the things that's really helpful are surge protectors, because a lot of times it's a power surge that can cause these fires, or your TV is overheating. We need that power going to it to stop as quickly as possible.
Because even if that TV is off, there's still power being delivered to that.
Yeah, if it's in absolutely.
You know,
long as
there's
it's
always
in
an
the
LED,
outlet.
some kind of light that shows that you're red, your TV's not on, or
Right.
whatever. So that TV is basically in sleep mode, as is my computers.
Right.
My
Yeah, and they're
computers
still
are in
drawing.
They're still
They're
drawing.
still drawing energy. And we find a lot of times where we go to a smell of smoke in the burning. Or a smell of smoke or burning inside of a building. We talked earlier about when people do call 911 for those reasons. A lot of times it is a motor, it's a TV that's burned up. It's hard to tell exactly what the source is. The way that we're able to see that is through thermal imaging cameras. So whereas everything in the room might be 65 degrees, but we're able to see one charger's at 110 degrees or more, we're able to normally reduce it down to the fact that that charger may have overheated. And when we research further into the issue, we may find that the breaker's tripped for where that charger is or where that appliance is.
So we have that protective measure kind of built in that when that overheats, but that's not always.
Hopefully, but it's not always the case, right?
Yeah, it's not.
So a lot of times it could be that appliance that is able to overheat long enough or short out where it's going to cause a fire.
You know, I have so many things in the house that run off of Wi-Fi. It would be, I lost Wi-Fi for 30 seconds the other day. It was upsetting.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Having to have all that stuff reset. If you had to plug it and unplug it all the
Yeah.
time, it would be really troublesome.
It would be, absolutely.
But there's really no way of preventing that unless you do that.
Right. And I mean, we don't, very rarely do we ever walk into a situation where somebody's actually following all of those. Where we do see it a lot, which is still helpful, is in the kitchen. We'll go into a lot of residences, and I know a lot of people that will unplug their appliances, obviously other than the refrigerator, when they're not being used, because of their concern that it's going to draw power or that it could short and start a fire. You'd be surprised at the number of fires that we're able to hold to a kitchen or to an appliance that started due to an issue with that given appliance. And when that happens, we record every piece of information that we can get from it. We supply that information back to NFIRS and other reporting agencies, and then they compile this information. That's a lot of times how you'll get consumer alerts for fires. is because we do this type of reporting. We'll give them the serial numbers, we send pictures, and we give them a description of what happened and how it happened.
So if I'm leaving for my house on a vacation, what do I need to do to help protect and reduce the chance of a fire while I'm gone?
Unplug anything that's not going to be used. Yeah, I mean, it's an easy task for what you're looking at saving.
So that means unplugging your computers, unplugging
Sure.
your Wi-Fi even?
You could, yeah.
All the TVs?
Mm-hmm.
All these Alexa and Googles and
Right.
all this stuff?
Right. Because it's hard to, a lot of people see that these things may happen sometimes. They never think it's going to happen to them, but they do frequently occur.
What are the chances of a fire happening within a wall from the wiring of the house?
They do happen. It depends on how old the house is, how long it's been there, whether there was some type of renovation or construction that went on, as well as if we've had potentially a lightning strike or we're going through a series of power surges. There are a lot of the variables that go into what could cause a fire in a wall. But again, those are things that do happen. And when people feel that they smell something burning inside of their homes, it's really important for them to alert us as soon as they can so that we can find that and stop it quickly.
That's a symptom when you smell something that's
Yeah, absolutely.
That's plastic burning, some type of smell like that.
Right. You look at the longer somebody waits, the chance we have of protecting their property, protecting lives goes down significantly.
I think what happens is people become a little fearful of all the commotion that's going to occur when you call
That's exactly what
911 and
happens.
say, I
Right.
smell something.
Right.
But you guys don't mind.
No, we absolutely don't mind. There are at least 2 to 3 firefighters in our station 24/7, and we are here specifically to respond to our residents' emergencies. So we're expecting to go out on calls, and it is never a bother. That's what we're here for.
So Christmas time is really, I think, a time, the holiday seasons are a time to really pay attention to what we're doing.
Sure.
And I say this too as far as our pets go, because the people are coming in and out of your home, and
Absolutely.
there's commotion your animals aren't used to.
Right.
So I'm kind of leading in. Does the fire department still climb a tree for a cat?
We had a call about 12 days ago for a kitten in a tree. Yeah, depending on the circumstance. Regardless of the emergency, especially here in Peters, and whether it's a public service or an emergency, we'll go to great lengths to make sure that we're doing anything that we can for our residents. So absolutely, if somebody calls us with an issue with a pet, which the cats do climb into trees, but there's a wide range of calls that we'll go to, from cats stuck into heating vents to ferrets being stuck in the HVAC. You name it. If somebody calls 911 and they're not sure who to send, 90% of the time it's going to be to send the fire department, and we'll figure out what to do next, if we need to bring in other resources or how to handle it.
So when we dial 911 and we're calling specifically, we say, okay, I have smoke in my home.
Mm-hmm.
They're sending somebody from the police department
Mm-hmm.
along with the fire department?
Yeah, so it depends. They're going to ask you a series of questions, and most of this is computer generated. So as you call and you say, they'll ask you the address, they start to put that in. As soon as you give your first initial information of, somebody's not breathing, or my house is on fire, I smell smoke, they're going to code that in their system, and based on what they put in, it'll drop down with more questions. As you respond to those, it'll come up with additional information telling them who to dispatch based on how you answer the questions. So if you call for a fire in Peters, it at a minimum immediately is going to bring us Peters Police, Fire, and Ambulance, as well as North Strabane Fire Department automatically.
So you guys work together, the communities work together?
Correct, yeah. There's actually a multi-year automatic aid agreement between North Strabane and Peters Township. And that is to ensure that we get the appropriate and adequate number of staff on scene of a fire call quickly. Now, we still rely on our home response from our volunteers and off-duty firefighters, because that's essential to being able to provide our service. But bringing North Strabane in, who's also staffed 24/7, means that we get people there a lot quicker.
And you had mentioned earlier in the show that we have 2 fire chiefs?
Yes, well, actually we have 3 fire chiefs. So we have a fire chief and a deputy chief. They're township employees, and then we have an assistant fire chief as well, who's a volunteer.
And who are they for Peters Township?
So our fire chief is Mike McLaughlin, our deputy fire chief is Dave Caputo, and our assistant fire chief is Bill Gahn.
And so they oversee everything that goes on within the fire department?
Absolutely. In addition to that, think we may have talked before, but we're also responsible for emergency management of the township. So our fire chief, McLaughlin, is also the emergency manager.
And that involves, let's say, flooding, for example. The fire department will come out and assist with flooding on roads and so forth.
Correct. And the emergency management aspect is a bit higher level, so that's dealing with responding agencies to large incidents. So if we have a natural disaster that is significant, wide area flooding, the fire department's going to handle the management of that incident, coordinating between different agencies that are responding, tracking everything that's happening, and essentially returning the community back to normal. So it's not only natural disasters, but also man-made disasters. So when you look at mass shootings, a lot of those things that are going on in the country right now, that falls down to an emergency management aspect, because we have to ensure that we're prepared for anything that's going to happen. There's a lot of pre-planning that occurs with emergency management, and one of the big parts of it, when even if you look at like a hurricane, for example, they're responsible not only for the response to that incident, but it's also responsible for the aftermath, the cleanup, and then eventually returning your community to a normal status. So it's a really big 360 approach, and it's community oriented to make sure that we are planning for an emergency, that we're responding correctly, that we are mitigating and stopping the emergency, and then the period of time where we're trying to return the community and our resources back to normal.
So you work actually with a number of different agencies then.
Yeah, and that's something else that I wanted to mention as well, since you touched on North Strabane. They are automatic aid for us. So if we get dispatched to a fire and I'm working and I get in the truck, I don't have to ask our 911 center to send them. They're already coming. When we look at responding to fires in different areas of the township, we're still going to request different departments. So if we're on our far eastern end of the township next to Finleyville and we're going for a confirmed structure fire, I'm probably going to request Finleyville and Bethel Park Fire Department as well. They're over there and they're pretty close to it. Plus, a working fire requires a lot of personnel. Ourselves and North Strabane can't handle it alone.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing, because I think at one point in time everybody kind of did their own things. Wasn't that the case?
That's true. We don't face a whole ton of it here, but there are other areas of our state and other counties near Washington that have a lot of issues with who they're sending to emergencies, because one department may not prefer another one, even though they might be close to the incident. So thankfully that's not something that happens here, nor will that ever be something that our leadership and administrative staff will allow to happen.
And then in your service to the community, you are also raising money for muscular dystrophy.
Yeah, that's we do a lot of community service projects as well. The MDA is something that firefighters in general have been very involved with and big on supporting and funding. So we just wrapped up 2 fundraising sessions at Giant Eagle, and we'll be doing one more on Super Bowl Sunday. So we hope to, we're right around $3,000 or so, and we're hoping to raise another $1,000 to $1,500 on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, that's really nice that with everything that you have to do,
right.
that you guys get in there and do that.
We try. It's really important. So I mean, when you look at public safety as a general term used in a lot of different aspects, but when you look at actually providing true public safety to residents, it is really important that there is that relationship between the emergency responders and the people that they serve. And that happens through collaboration, such as our Citizens Fire Academy. Our police department does a police academy. And that intimate interaction and collaboration between the two sides. So that if we respond to your house for an emergency, especially if you have kids, it's not the first time you're encountering us. You may at least recognize our faces. You know that we're going to be kind and professional and that we're there to help you above all else. So our community involvement and engagement, not just on emergency related incidents, but for community events, for public relation events, for the MDA collection, is really important to us. So we really take it seriously any chance that we have to be out in the public and meeting our residents.
And then you have a program also where you come into schools and educate kids
absolutely.
on fire safety.
We run hundreds of fire education programs throughout the year, from preschool age all the way to elderly adults in nursing homes. So our reach in a given year is thousands and thousands of people, and we put a lot of time into preventing the fires and the emergencies before it happens, because it's a lot cheaper for us to pay to put time into preventing it and to making sure that codes are met than it is to respond to the fire with all of those personnel. And then it's very expensive, obviously, for our township, for the insurance companies, for the people that are experiencing that emergency. So the reduction of the risk in our community and the prevention of emergencies is a huge part of what we do.
I think prevention is key for everything.
Sure, yeah.
Whether it be your health or your finances even.
Absolutely.
To react, you got to be proactive.
Right, and it's easy to forget the prevention side a lot of times, but I mean, we've learned that is one of the biggest areas of what we do. And that's one of the reasons that we do see a lower number of fires, is because we spend so much time ensuring that they don't happen.
So I'm driving down the road and I see smoke off in the distance. It looks bizarre to me.
Call 911.
Just regardless if it's somebody burning leaves in their yard.
Yep, it's a lot. Well, you can't burn leaves in your yard in Peters Township. So
okay.
Either way, we want to go to make sure that they're not doing the wrong thing.
Right.
While we don't want false or bogus calls or calls of malintent, if somebody feels for some reason that the fire department needs to go check something out, call 911. Again, we're there all the time, and we'd much rather check then than wait 40 minutes and go to something that could be far worse.
So it's abnormal to see any type of smoke around a house,
especially very close to the house.
Unless it's coming out of the top of the chimney.
Right. And you can't have a fire within 50 feet of your structure either. So, yeah, it doesn't hurt, to be honest. Normally, we and the police will go and check that. So a police officer may get there prior to us and say, okay, it's a recreational burn. They might be having a campfire. You guys don't need to come. And that's fine. But again, we never look at that in a negative fashion. We want to be out making sure that there's not something more severe going on.
Do you have a problem with fires caused by barbecues and grills and so forth?
We have in the past, absolutely. We've gone to a number of structure fires that basically go onto the whole house from a grill that was right next to it. They're infrequent in number, however, the severity is normally pretty high.
Because you have an explosive tank there with a propane.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of the things that we need to do to prevent that from happening?
Keep it away from the house. I mean, look at the vinyl and plastic siding that are on the sides of houses now. If you have a grill open and it flares up, even just the heat going onto that vinyl, it very quickly can go to a bad situation.
I think one of the things that people don't realize with the propane grills that we have is you should never light that grill with the lid down. You always have to open that lid first and to light the grill.
Right.
You know, and I think people don't even think about that.
Yeah, it's going to trap all that gas right in there.
Yeah. Or if you're using coals to cook, those things burn for hours afterwards.
They do, absolutely.
So how do we extinguish those? What's the best way to do that?
Well, removing the oxygen is a big part to actually get them out. But after that, we want to try to smother them to get water on them to actually put them out fully. Because as you mentioned, something can smolder for many hours, whether it be from a fireplace or outside on a barbecue grill. We could get a call 8 to 10 hours later that something is on fire because of the amount of heat that had been building there for that period of time.
I can't actually recall. I think I talked to you about this during the break, but I had a log burning fireplace.
Right.
And I had a gas igniter. So I had a big log in there. It was easy to light. I got a call to go someplace, and it's middle of winter, and I really wanted to go. So this log was burning. So I did have a mat that you could put on top of the log to smother it.
Yeah.
So I did that first. So it went down to no flames. And then I dragged that thing out into the snow, and I left. I covered it with snow.
Right.
I came back 4 hours later, and it was still smoldering in the snow.
Right.
And you said, how can that happen? It's cold. There's snow on top of it. You know.
Right. They go on for long periods of time, but like you said, a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Or they discard them in a garbage can, or we've had situations where they're putting their ashes into a cardboard box inside, and there's still heat there. It's going to ignite.
And then there's chemicals in that cardboard box that.
Right. Absolutely. And everything around it has sprayed with chemicals. The couches were sitting on everything, the walls, the paint. There are so many accelerants inside of a house. It's shocking when you start to really look at all of it.
So how long does it take for, let's say a fire starts, sets a drape on fire, how long does it take on the average house before the house is consumed with smoke and fire?
It depends. So if we were looking at 30, 40 years ago to that type of construction, you could have 25 minutes to 45 minutes where the fire's building. When you look at modern construction, you might have 4 to 5 minutes to escape from a home fire.
Modern construction, 4 to 5 minutes.
Right. So I mean, think about the fact that when a fire's dispatched, once somebody gets outside, they've got to call 911, they have to dispatch us, we have to get in our trucks and get there. By the time we get there, it is already a well-involved fire. So when our personnel are entering the structure, the structural elements, the floors, the joists could be very affected. So we're sending our people into a pretty dangerous environment when we're there 7 to 8 minutes after the initial call.
Because again, those building materials are loaded with chemicals that ignite.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, glues and so forth.
Yes, they're sprayed with things that are meant to be fire retardants so that it takes longer for them to catch. But once they do catch, they go up in just ferociously, you know. So that's why it's so important to have smoke detectors. That's why it's so important to get out quickly, and that our response times, you know, meet the standards of the township.
So there's no running back into the house to
Absolutely not.
grab my jewelry or my paintings on the wall.
Yeah, does not matter. Yeah, unfortunately, even if it's another person, we're going to get there as quickly as we can, and we're going to try to get them out. We'll go to great risk to get them out.
Is there a particular time of the day that fires happen more than?
Not necessarily. I mean, the fires that are normally more deadly that are going to result in deaths happen overnight because people are sleeping. If you don't have the proper detection systems, they're not going to know about it, and it is so easy to be overcome with smoke.
You know, we're coming pretty close to the end of the show. I mean, it's really so much information that you're giving, and the hour goes by really quick.
It does, yeah.
But is there some points you want to make that before we end the show?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big things is just that we are available for home fire safety inspections. So that is a phenomenal resource to our residents. We come out, we make sure that all of your smoke detectors are in date because they do expire. If they are expired, we will put new ones up for you. We bring them with us. We don't charge you. It is so important for us to make sure that every house in our municipality has working smoke detectors. We're not worried about cost. We want to make sure that everybody's safe. Additionally, we'll look at things like tripping hazards for the elderly. We'll look at CO detectors in their locations. We give out fire extinguishers, and then we answer general questions because a lot of residents have questions as far as what they should do in the event of fire, how they can learn more about it. So they can schedule these by giving us a call or shooting me an email, and I'd be happy to get one of our crews out there.
Hey, Jordan, I thank you so much for coming on,
Thank
taking
you for
the
the
time. I
opportunity.
know how busy you are, and I would appreciate it if you come back from time to time, give us
Absolutely.
updates on things that are happening and what's going on with the fire department.
We sure can.
And what the community can do for you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. I want to thank Jordan Cramer from Peters Township Fire Department for sharing all his knowledge and information and his service. Remember, a healthy pet is a happy pet, and when you're healthy as well. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.